Donald Trump was once considered an unruly child. Teachers at his elementary school described him as restless, loud, and difficult to control. His father, Fred Trump, a stern real estate magnate in Queens, believed discipline could fix his son. So when Donald's behavior became too much, the solution was drastic. He was sent away to the New York Military Academy. It wasn't punishment in the traditional sense. It was exile into a world of strict routines, dawn drills, and relentless order. Fred hoped the academy would tame Donald's wild streak, but instead it forged something else, a hunger for dominance. Wearing a cadet's uniform, the boy from Queens discovered he loved leading. He loved being saluted. And most of all, he loved winning. Losing to him was humiliation. Imagine the sound of boots striking pavement at sunrise, the cold air biting the skin, the bark of drill sergeants echoing across the parade ground. In that setting, young Donald wasn't broken. He was sharpened. What others saw as arrogance, he framed as confidence. What others called recklessness, he considered courage. Each confrontation only deepened his belief. Life is a battlefield, and you either conquer or you're conquered. By the time he entered college, first at Fordham, then at the Wharton School of Business, Trump already carried himself less like a student and more like a showman preparing for the world stage. Wharton classmates remember him as brash, always talking about real estate deals and money. While others studied theories, Trump spoke in certainties. He would tell anyone who listened. He wasn't just going to make money, he was going to make a name. But the shadow of his father loomed large. Fred Trump had built a fortune in housing complexes across Brooklyn and Queens, becoming wealthy but hardly glamorous. For Donald, glamour mattered. He didn't want to be a quiet landlord managing apartments for middle-class families. He wanted skyscrapers that pierced the New York skyline, hotels where celebrities walked the halls, casinos where fortunes changed hands. He wanted, as he once said, to think big. Even then, he understood that success wasn't just about profit, it was about spectacle. If Fred Trump was a builder, Donald would be a brand. Every project would not just generate revenue, it would carry his name in bold letters, T-R-U-M-P. That mindset was already forming in his youth. At military school, he learned how to command attention. At Wharton, he learned the language of deals and leverage. And in his own imagination, he began stitching these lessons together into a vision. Real estate as theater, business as performance. Those who knew him in these early years often misread the ambition. Some thought it was bravado that would fade. Others dismissed him as the loud son of a rich father. But Donald Trump didn't see limits. He saw New York City rising, its towers climbing higher each year. And he decided that one of those towers had to belong to him. The boy from Queens who once refused to sit still in a classroom was about to step into Manhattan. And Manhattan, the beating heart of American ambition, was about to meet a man who believed he was destined not only to play the game, but to rewrite its rules. New York in the 1970s was a city in crisis. Crime was soaring, graffiti-covered subway cars, and entire neighborhoods seemed abandoned. But Donald Trump didn't just see decay, he saw opportunity. To him, Manhattan wasn't dying, it was a stage waiting for a new star, and he was determined that star would be Donald J. Trump. His first big move came in 1976, when he set his sights on the Commodore Hotel near Grand Central Terminal. The once grand building had fallen into ruin, its marble floors stained, its hallways empty. Most developers saw a money pit. Trump saw a headline. With relentless determination, he negotiated a deal that few believed possible, partnering with Hyatt Hotels, persuading banks to lend money despite the city's bankruptcy crisis, and convincing government officials to grant unprecedented tax breaks. It was a gamble. But when the Commodore reopened in 1980 as the Grand Hyatt Hotel, glittering, modern, and instantly profitable, Trump's gamble paid off. More importantly, his name was suddenly everywhere. The New York Times profiled him, calling him the young man who could revive Manhattan. Trump understood that the real profit wasn't just in the building, it was in the publicity. From that moment, he doubled down on spectacle. If the Grand Hyatt had proven he could play the game, his next project would prove he could redefine it. He envisioned a skyscraper on Fifth Avenue, the most prestigious address in New York. But not just any tower. This one would bear his name in massive gold letters, Trump Tower. Picture Manhattan in the early 1980s. Wall Street booming, luxury culture rising, and Donald Trump standing in the middle of it all, promising something bigger than life. He tore down the old Bonwit Teller building, despite promises to preserve its Art Deco sculptures, sparking outrage but commanding attention. When the tower rose, 68 stories of glass and bronze, it became more than a building. It was a symbol. The atrium, with its marble walls and cascading waterfall, wasn't designed just for tenants. It was designed for cameras. Opening day in 1983 felt more like a movie premiere than a real estate launch. Celebrities, politicians, socialites, they all came. The press cameras flashed as Donald and his then-wife Ivana greeted the crowd. For Trump, it wasn't enough to build. He had to perform. He had turned business into theater, and Trump Tower was his stage. The skyscraper drew in wealthy buyers from around the globe. Luxury apartments sold for record prices, stores rented at premium rates, and the tower quickly became one of Manhattan's most famous addresses. But what mattered most to Trump was that the building screamed his name. Trump wasn't just on the sign, it was now part of the cultural conversation. He soon expanded beyond New York. Casinos in Atlantic City, airline ventures, even attempts at sports teams, each one branded with Trump in bold capital letters. Not all succeeded. Some would fail spectacularly, but each project reinforced his image as a man who thought bigger than anyone else. By the mid-1980s, Donald Trump had transformed himself from the son of a Queens landlord into Manhattan's most famous developer. He bought a yacht, a football team, and even floated rumors of running for political office. He became a fixture in tabloids, photographed at parties, quoted in gossip columns, interviewed on talk shows. For Trump, fame was not a byproduct, it was the business itself. Every deal, every appearance, every controversy added to the myth. He wasn't just building towers of steel and glass, he was building a brand, a persona, a story that millions would come to know. And as the city skyline gleamed with his towers, Trump looked further. Real estate was only the beginning. The empire he imagined was far larger, and his ambitions were far louder. The boy from Queens was no longer in his father's shadow. He was the headline, the spectacle, the showman of Manhattan, and soon the entire world would learn his name. By the mid-1980s, Donald Trump was no longer just a developer. He was a celebrity businessman. His face appeared in glossy magazines, his quotes filled gossip columns, and his name flashed across New York like a neon sign. He was photographed at black tie galas, often alongside Ivana Trump, the glamorous wife who seemed to complete the image of the golden couple. Together, they embodied the excess of the decade: designer clothes, private jets, and a lifestyle meant to be envied. Trump expanded furiously. In Atlantic City, he built casinos that glittered along the boardwalk: the Trump Plaza, the Trump Castle, and later the colossal Trump Taj Mahal. In New York, he snapped up luxury buildings, sports arenas, and even tried his hand at owning a professional football team. He bought a mega yacht and plastered his name on it: Trump Princess. Every move was bigger, louder, and riskier. To Trump, debt wasn't a danger, it was leverage. Banks lined up to lend him billions, dazzled by his confidence. He became a master at using borrowed money to fuel expansion, convinced the party would never end. But beneath the shine, cracks were forming. The late 1980s brought recession, and the very scale of Trump's empire became its greatest weakness. His casinos hemorrhaged cash, his airline venture collapsed, and his yacht became a floating symbol of excess. The man who once seemed untouchable suddenly looked vulnerable. The 1990s hit like a storm. Trump's businesses faced billions in debt. Headlines that once celebrated him now mocked him. The New York Times reported on his financial troubles with glee, while tabloids feasted on his personal drama. Most famously, his bitter divorce from Ivana splashed across front pages as the War of the Trumps. In 1991, the Trump Taj Mahal declared bankruptcy. Soon after, other casinos followed. His creditors circled, threatening to dismantle his empire. For most businessmen, it would have been the end. But Trump was not like most. He renegotiated, stalled, and clawed his way through deals that allowed him to keep his name, his most valuable asset, intact. Even as his empire shrank, Trump understood something crucial. The public was still watching, and as long as they were watching, he wasn't finished. By the late 1990s, he began reinventing himself, not as the biggest developer in New York, but as the ultimate showman. He leaned into television, guest appearances, and branding deals. His name went on to everything from steaks to bottled water to cologne. Many mocked these ventures, but they kept the Trump brand alive in the cultural bloodstream. Then came the opportunity that would change everything: television's reality revolution. In 2004, NBC premiered The Apprentice. The premise was simple but powerful. Contestants competed for a job working for Donald Trump, who sat at the center of a gleaming boardroom. Each week, he judged them, praised their successes, and cut down their failures with two words that became iconic: "You're fired." The show was a hit. Millions tuned in, not to learn about business, but to watch Trump play the role he had always wanted: the ultimate boss, decisive, commanding, larger than life. For a new generation, Trump wasn't a struggling casino owner or a tabloid punchline. He was the billionaire who decided fates with a point of his finger. The boardroom catchphrase became a cultural phenomenon. Trump's image as a tough, no-nonsense businessman solidified. In truth, the show carefully crafted this persona, editing, staging, and lighting every moment to make him appear commanding. But perception mattered more than reality, and the perception was clear: Donald Trump was back. By the time The Apprentice ran its course, Trump's brand was more powerful than ever. He had survived scandal, bankruptcy, and ridicule, and emerged not just alive but reinvented. He was no longer just a businessman, he was a celebrity businessman, a character larger than the city that raised him. But in Trump's mind, television was only the rehearsal. The real stage, the one he had eyed for decades, was politics. And soon the line between reality TV and reality itself would blur in ways no one could have imagined. For years, Donald Trump flirted with politics. He teased presidential runs in the late 1980s, again in 2000, and once more in 2012. Each time the idea seemed like another publicity stunt, just one more way to keep the Trump name in headlines. Few in Washington took him seriously. To them, Trump was a celebrity sideshow, a tabloid figure, a reality TV star with no real place in politics. But in 2015, that changed. Standing in the golden atrium of Trump Tower, beneath the gleaming escalators that had become symbols of his empire, Trump descended to announce his candidacy for President of the United States. The moment was pure theater. Cameras flashing, supporters waving signs, and Trump delivering a speech that shocked the political establishment. "The American dream is dead," he declared, his voice echoing off marble walls. And then came the line that defined his campaign: "Make America Great Again." At first, pundits laughed. The political class dismissed him as a novelty, a man who would fade once the seriousness of the race began. But Trump knew something they didn't. Millions of Americans felt left behind. By globalization, by politicians, by a system they believed was rigged. Where others spoke in polished sound bites, Trump spoke bluntly, often crudely, but in a way that connected. His rallies became spectacles. Thousands packed into arenas, chanting, waving flags, wearing red MAGA hats. The energy was electric, more like a concert than a campaign event. His opponents underestimated him, but the crowds did not. They saw a man who claimed to speak for them, not for Washington elites. The media, too, couldn't look away. Every provocative statement, every insult, every outrageous tweet became front-page news. Trump understood this better than anyone. Controversy meant attention, and attention meant dominance. He didn't need to buy as many ads as his rivals. He commanded free airtime by being impossible to ignore. The Republican primary, once thought unwinnable for him, turned into a series of victories. One by one, seasoned politicians fell. Governors, senators, lifelong public servants, all outlasted by a man the establishment had mocked. By mid-2016, Donald Trump was the Republican nominee. The general election was even more explosive. Facing Hillary Clinton, a seasoned politician with decades of experience, Trump ran as the outsider, the disruptor. He attacked the media, ridiculed opponents, and promised to drain the swamp. Crowds grew larger, chants of "lock her up" echoed through stadiums. On election night, November 8, 2016, the world held its breath. Polls had predicted Clinton's victory, but as results rolled in, something shocking unfolded. Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, states thought to be Democratic strongholds, tilted red. By midnight, it was clear. Donald J. Trump had pulled off one of the greatest political upsets in American history. The boy from Queens, the brash developer, the tabloid fixture, the reality TV star, was now the 45th president of the United States. For supporters, it was vindication, proof that an outsider could beat the system. For opponents, it was disbelief, even horror, a sign that America had entered uncharted territory. Trump stepped onto the stage as president-elect, his family at his side, the crowd roaring. His victory speech was uncharacteristically subdued, but the message was unmistakable. The rules of politics had changed forever. The presidency of Donald Trump would not be like anything that came before, and the chaos of the campaign was only a preview of what was to come. When Donald Trump took the oath of office on January 20th, 2017, Washington braced for impact. He had promised to disrupt the system, and from day one, disruption defined his presidency. His inaugural speech set the tone. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. The crowd cheered, while critics felt a chill. This wasn't the polished language of politics. It was blunt, raw, and unapologetic. Inside the Oval Office, Trump governed the same way he had campaigned, through spectacle. He tweeted at dawn, attacked opponents by name, and sparred with the press almost daily. Supporters loved it. They saw a president who refused to play by Washington's rules. Detractors saw chaos, unpredictability, and danger. His administration rolled out sweeping policies. He slashed regulations, cut taxes, and appointed conservative judges at a record pace. He withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement, renegotiated trade deals, and confronted China with tariffs. Abroad, he shook alliances, cozied up to adversaries, and brokered historic agreements in the Middle East. At home, the economy surged, unemployment hit record lows, and the stock market soared until the storms arrived. Controversy never left his side. Investigations into Russian interference, accusations of obstruction, and ultimately impeachment dominated headlines. Trump called it all a witch hunt, fueling his base with the idea that he alone was fighting against a corrupt establishment. His critics saw a president eroding institutions, bending truth, and dividing the nation. Then came 2020. The year began with impeachment, but that quickly faded as the world was consumed by the COVID-19 pandemic. America faced lockdowns, overwhelmed hospitals, and an economy in freefall. Trump's handling of the crisis split the country further. Supporters praised his push to reopen. Critics blasted his downplaying of the virus. As the nation struggled, another storm erupted. Nationwide protests over racial injustice. The streets filled with anger, chants, and sometimes violence. Trump's response was uncompromising, calling for law and order, sending federal forces, and declaring himself the defender of America's silent majority. The 2020 election became one of the most divisive in U.S. history. Trump's rallies roared on, even amid the pandemic, with crowds chanting, "4 more years." But Joe Biden, promising unity and calm, built a coalition of voters tired of constant drama. When results rolled in, Biden secured victory. Trump, however, refused to concede. The final act of his presidency came on January 6, 2021. As Congress prepared to certify Biden's win, thousands of Trump supporters stormed the U.S. Capitol, fueled by claims of a stolen election. The images shocked the world. Rioters scaling walls, breaking windows, occupying the Senate chamber. Trump was impeached a second time, this time for incitement of insurrection. Though acquitted, the stain was permanent. On January 20th, 2021, Trump left Washington without attending his successor's inauguration. He boarded Air Force One, flying to Florida as his presidency ended. But in his mind, the story wasn't over. Even out of office, Trump remained the central figure in American politics, commanding loyalty from millions, shaping the Republican Party and hinting at a return. Love him or hate him, Donald Trump's presidency redefined America. To his supporters, he was a fighter who gave voice to the forgotten. To his opponents, he was a force of division who tested democracy itself. The boy from Queens had fulfilled his greatest dream. He had conquered the highest stage. Yet his legacy remains unsettled, part triumph, part turmoil, all spectacle. And the final question still hangs in the air. Was Donald Trump an interruption in history or the beginning of something entirely new?